Hello there. This is the Universal Mind Channel, and it's episode 6, part 3 of our study of reincarnation, the scientific theory of reincarnation. And to recap briefly, before we get into the physiological processes evolution adapted to preserve individuality, which is reincarnation, we must first understand the relationship between the universal mind after the Big Bang, how it created consciousness, and the effect consciousness has upon individuality, and how evolution adapted the human brain to prioritize both information and emotion. The universal law of conservation of energy and matter also includes conservation of information. We're going to get into that and have touched upon it briefly in the past. Death interferes with the accumulation of information. We die. But evolution, we believe, created an adaptation to our physiology that enables our mind and what we know to be individuality. The impact of emotionally imprinted memories upon consciousness that preserves our individuality from one life to the next. Evolution created an adaptation to do that. Why? Because without that, the universal laws of the conservation of information would be violated. So those laws mandated that unique information, individuality, coherent energy had to be preserved, conserved, as part of natural law. It's just the natural thing to do, isn't it? So that's what we're all about here. If you've got questions or wish to make a comment, you can reach us at the Universal Mind Channel at gmail.com. That's the Universal Mind Channel at gmail.com. All right, so we're looking at, and today's, if you want to call it lecture, today's lecture is from my book, Reincarnation, the Scientific Theory. And the part that we're going to go over today is more in depth as to how the laws of thermodynamics apply to reincarnation. Thermodynamics began as a study of how steam behaves under differential pressures and temperatures over time inside confined spaces, such as steam engines. However, scientists have discovered that the principles governing heat and pressure in confined spaces are merely applications of fundamental laws governing any process that causes a change of state of being of the particle or particles involved, whether it's a universe, a steam engine, or our lives. We're all natural processes. And the second law of thermodynamics states in all natural processes, the total entropy of a system plus its environment cannot decrease. It can remain constant for a reversible process, but must always increase for an irreversible one. The universe acts spontaneously to minimize potential outcomes of any process. Therefore, the universe always seeks to maximize uncertainty, entropy. As to entropy, time is asymmetrical. In other words, once something happens, it cannot be undone. The arrow of time always looks forward. It does not look back. In other words, you can't change what's been done. You can't unlearn, and you can't unlearn information. Can't do that. Therefore, the second law of thermodynamics creates a measure of the transformation of energy over time. Entropy equals uncertainty. Uncertainty, however, implies a lack of something objective, information. Information can be measured, analyzed, and transformed from one state to another. Information is the difference between uncertainty and certainty. Information is the balance between uncertainty and knowledge. Reincarnation is the logically evolutionary step of obeying the universal law of conservation of information. How does entropy interact with consciousness? All right, let me give you an example. You're walking along in the desert, and you happen to reach down, pick up a handful of sand. That sand is together in a clump. You know what it feels like. You're certain what it feels like because your senses tell you what it feels like. You know about how much you have in your hand. You know where it's going. Nowhere. It's in your hand. All right? Then throw it out. Throw everything, all those grains of sand into the air. Just like that. What have you done? You've created uncertainty, haven't you? You've created entropy. You've created a system, a process, whereby each of those particles have attained a mass, a trajectory, and a velocity of their own, different from each other. And as they arc away from you, their trajectories become ever more uncertain. Entropy is increasing over time. But your observation, as you watch them, you gain information as to their trajectories. So the uncertainty is offset, even though it increases over time. Your information as to their trajectories offsets the uncertainty. That's consciousness. And the universe created consciousness after the Big Bang. We talked about that in episode 1. Our universe, being a closed system, is subject to the laws of thermodynamics like any other. At the time of the Big Bang, entropy, uncertainty was relatively low. And as we discussed in the first episode, because of the heavy pressure and heat of the initial stages of the Big Bang, photons couldn't move, electrons could not bind to atoms. But as time passed and the temperatures and pressures decreased, after about 380,000 years, the photons began to move and electrons began to bind to atoms. The change in the degree of entropy can be measured. Information is caused by these measurements. Just like life. Life is a continuous series of information. Information over time creates measurements of the change of state of being, of ourselves and everything else in the universe. This proposition leads us to the surprising but logically inevitable conclusion that all knowledge is reducible to classical mechanical analysis. Since the second law of thermodynamics provides a measurement of change over time, scientists have concluded that this second law governs also the conservation of information. Information is the result of any observation or measurement. One may even conclude that information equals existence. You can't exist without creating, obtaining, and sharing information. You can't do it. And none of that can be undone. The universe doesn't allow it. So, how does the universe cope with death, physical death? Because doesn't death interfere with the natural process of information gathering, retention, and sharing? Doesn't it? And doesn't it also interfere with the law of conservation of information, that you can't delete it, can't undo it? Well, we're going to examine how how the universe dealt with that paradox. When any object undergoes a transformation, it creates information about its change of state during its transformation. All objects, including biological life forms, humans, us, create information describing the relative state of being during our existence. Information is created whenever any object undergoes anything. Every day, every minute, every second, we're creating information. In the human mind, we're creating memories loaded with emotion. Some emotions heavier than others, more important than others. The unimportant emotions we don't take with us from life to life. But the important events that are heavily loaded, the neurons that are heavily loaded with emotions, chemical loading from the limbic system, heavily loaded chemically to impress upon the system that these neurons need to be preserved. What it contains, the neurons die, but the information, the chemical processes have to be preserved because they contain information that is necessary to our continuing unique information, our individuality. Now, the father, I do want to go into information conservation. The father-son team of Horodecki, PhD, and his son Michael, together the two of them reformulated the second law of thermodynamics to better conform to quantum theory. Their redefinition of the second law of thermodynamics, according to quantum theory, is as follows, and this is a quote from them. In quantum mechanics, one cannot either delete or clone quantum information. The second law holds that entropy cannot be decreased in a closed system. Again, the second law can be stated in a much stronger way, that the energy of the density matrix does not change under quantum evolution. And this is actually the information conservation principle. Can't change information. From this redefinition of the second law of thermodynamics comes two principles of information conservation. The first, the no deleting principle. In a closed system, and let me get the quote on this. The Horodecki's is the no deleting and no cloning principles as consequences of conservation of quantum information. It's at the journal arXiv 2003. And this quote is also from them. In a closed system, one cannot destroy quantum information. Quantum information can only be moved from one subspace location to another. In a closed system, even opposite states cannot be deleted alone. Once entropy or information has increased, it cannot be decreased. It can only be transferred to a separate location. You move it around, but you can't destroy it. Universe is a balance. If you can't delete information, can you copy it? They add this. The Horodecki's add this. What they call the no cloning principle. Quote, quantum information cannot be leaked out while keeping the original information intact. This is true for both open and closed systems. This principle is already provable given using unitary evolution dynamics. Once information is increased, it cannot return to its original state. You can't undo it. In other words, quantum information cannot be duplicated. Therefore, information is unique unto itself. A physicist, Marco Roncaglia's field of expertise is quantum mechanics and theoretical physics. He's a past visiting fellow at the University of Munich's Department of Physics. His paper on conservation of information in quantum physics introduced the concept of coherent information being conserved in a quantum state. And to save time, what I'll do is I'll list the references as citations in the description. Therefore, we can move along faster. According to Roncaglia, quote, pure states contain more coherent information than mixed states, as the missing information has been converted into correlations with the environment. It's been mixed, but not deleted and not redone, not modified. We will find that the coherent information associated to genuinely quantum phenomena is indeed conserved under unitary processes. Roncaglia's correlations sound very much like the neurally encoded memories we observe in the human brain. Put simply, what we experience as neutrally encoded stimuli is Roncaglia's pure information. This information is pure because it's raw sensory input. There's no emotional bias affecting its coherence. Through contemplation, analysis, or simply impulse, we mix this pure sensory input with the emotional resonances created from memories from past experiences. In this process, some of the pure data is lost to our consciousness. While lost to our conscious awareness, the original sensory information remains conserved under quantum processes. This is how information conservation becomes important to our human existence. It places the information we use to create our own unique information, our individuality, within the framework of quantum mechanics and the second law of thermodynamics. Reincarnation is based upon two fundamental principles. First, evolutionary adaptations of the human brain created process of creating unique information we call individuality. This individuality is unique information created through the interaction of new stimuli, pure information, with emotionally loaded memories of past experiences, mixed information, mixed because it's data plus emotion, subjective feelings, and the two are mixed. Second, the quantum mechanical application of the second law of thermodynamics upon this unique information we call individuality compels the evolutionary adaptations that created reincarnation as the biological process to conserve individuality from one life to the next, to conform the human existence, eternal and infinite, as a conscious experience without violating universal laws of conservation of information. Therefore, in a rather ironic and unique way, defeating death, because the body dies. But before the body dies, evolution crafted an adaptation that allows the human body to preserve our individuality for the next life. That is reincarnation. It's not a fable. It's not make-believe. I believe that it's as real as science. Now, there are some that object to reincarnation. And I understand it's controversial. Some believe and challenge reincarnation is based upon lack of evidence. Some claim it does not exist because there's no evidence that it exists. Well, number one, you can't prove a negative. You can't prove it doesn't exist. But there's no evidence that aliens exist on other planets either. Does that lack of evidence convince us not to search? No, it doesn't. We don't need tangible physical evidence of the existence of alien life on other planets because we do believe they exist. The weight of the logical inferences we've drawn from our life experience compels our faith in such a conclusion. We have enough experiential awareness that aliens might exist that it's worth the search. We have to do the same thing about rebirth in order to study it further, to understand what it means and what it does to us. For such is the case with the biological process for life after death. The weight of logical evidence presents the inference based upon our life experience to force that conclusion. Now, a second challenge arises out of the problem of transferring information from a dying body to one that's living or about to be born. Without a transport mechanism in place to secure memories and transfer them from a dying body to an unborn one, or a fetus, it's all a waste of time, isn't it? Furthermore, wouldn't this transport mechanism have to be a quantum mechanical one at that? Of course. It's also true. It would have to be quantum mechanical in function. But that transport mechanism already exists. It exists in the universe and it exists in our bodies. That transport mechanism we're looking for is found within every cell of our bodies. Biophotons. Now, the team of Sion Shi, Prem Kumar, and K.F. Lee proved that biophotonic transmission of information did exist and does exist, and they discovered that in 2017. Now, Kumar served as a professor of physics at Northwestern University's Center for Photonic Communication and Computing. Together, they generated a polarization-tangled two-photon state in an ensemble of fluorophones. According to the report, quote, recent development of spectroscopic techniques based upon quantum states of light can precipitate many breakthroughs in observing and controlling light-matter interactions in biological materials on a fundamental quantum level. Biophoton packets can be entangled to transmit coherent information almost instantaneously and seemingly without limit, infinitely. Researcher Tristan Tintrup, a promising PhD candidate from the University of Twente in the Netherlands, and his team claim that, quote, encoding information in the position of single photons has no known limits. Even our military has recognized the importance of using photons as carriers of information. In a rare unclassified research report, the United States Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, describes the photon as, quote, a fundamental carrier of information, possessing numerous information-carrying degrees of freedom, including frequency, phase, arrival time, orbital and angular momentum, linear momentum, entanglement, etc. The purpose of the DARPA program, dubbed INFO, is to pursue the fundamental science and applications of photonic communications, biophotonic and non-biophotonic. Biophotonic is body-based photons. We have photons being emitted from our body every second. What they do, what their purpose, we don't understand that. But when you think about it, the universe has been awash in photons, carrying information for billions of years. Suns have been born, lived billions of years, and died, exploded, and given rebirth to new life, new stars. And if it is true that we are starborn, that we're star children, that what the solar system, this part of the galaxy, this galaxy and this part of the universe, and this universe is awash in ever-renewing photons, a sea of photonic energy that's existed since the dawn of time, and those photons carry information. Doesn't it make sense that the biophotons that we have share all that information, that the photons that have existed since the dawn of time have accumulated, absorbed, shared? There's so much to reality, there's so much to existence that we mere humans haven't the foggiest clue about. The time to stop fighting among ourselves and start looking within the human body's ability to preserve information from one life to the next, how it affects us. The time is now. DARPA's application of photonic communication for military communications and imagery provides a near-perfect match with our reincarnation model of neural memory information processing within our own human brain at death. Isn't that ironic? The military is already on their way to understanding it, and yet they're not sharing how it affects our unique individuality, our soul. They'd rather use it as a means of making death, physical death, easier to come by at wartime. Ironic. We conclude that the process humans have termed death is not an end of life, but a transformation of the coherent energy created by biological life when the physical body decays. Without reincarnation, the energy of the biological life form would lose coherence at death, causing the dissipation of consciousness along with all the information and memories collected during life. Evolution creates a lifeboat of energy coherence from memories loaded with emotions that need to be preserved to maintain unique information, individuality, as coherent energy between the end of biological life of the old host and, I propose, a fetus beginning its new life. Photons travel at the speed of light. Doesn't it make sense that it could carry information from a dying person to a fetus like that, or quicker? Of course it could. How many times can a photon travel around the world in a second? Think about it. Does this mean that consciousness is being transferred from one physical body to another? That's a good question, isn't it? Because reincarnation is separate from consciousness. Reincarnation is a process. Consciousness is an energy. It's a coherent energy. Reincarnation is a process intended to conserve individuality as an expression of ever more complex information, which may be intended or unintended consequence of consciousness, but they're not the same. Reincarnation is the process by which evolution has adapted the human body to preserve the information we obtain using consciousness as an energy source, as a carrier wave. Consciousness, we believe, creates the foundation for self-awareness. In our next episode, we'll look even further into how evolution plays a very vital role in preserving and conserving unique information, our individuality. Thank you so much for being with us today. If you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to contact us at theuniversalmindchannel@gmail.com. That's theuniversalmindchannel@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and have a great day. This is the Universal Mind Channel.